Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we're talking about Thor Love and Thunder, the new Taika Waititi Thor movie, new entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've got the window open because it's sweltering, so if you hear, cars and stuff, that's what that is.
Yes. Adds ambience.
Right, so...
Which this podcast will need.
Yeah, I don't think we even saw a trailer for this, but it was coming... In fact, the reason that I booked this... I suppose we were going to see it anyway because, new Marvel movie, but I got an email from Cineworld saying if you book now, we'll enter you in a draw to have a trip to Disneyland Paris. Ah. So I thought, yeah.
You kept that secret from me?
Yeah, well, that's because if I win, you're not fucking coming.
I know.
But that's why I booked it up. I don't think either of us was especially mad about it, but, could be good. I don't think we thought it was very good.
For me, and just in terms of my experience of watching it, this is the worst experience I've had at a Marvel film.
Really?
Yes.
You haven't seen a worse one than this, even the first couple of Thors.
No, I know I found things to like in the first couple of Thors, actually. But I don't know if it's just that, Waikiki's sense of humor didn't work on me this time around. I thought it was all kind of naff and predictable. I hated the look of the film. I hated the action. Mm-hmm. I hated the cheap sentimentality of it all. So I was half just, trying not to fall asleep and also just being conscious of not really responding to anything, really.
Taika Waititi's shtick, I think, is starting to wear a little thin. He's someone... maybe, Chris Pratt has had a bit of this too, where, when he first showed up, he was really likeable and there was something quite original about him.
I still love Chris Pratt.
Okay, but
I know, he's a Christian and so on, but I like him.
But he got overexposed quick.
Yeah.
And I kind of think that might be starting to happen with Taika Waititi. It's that very chummy thing. And it's coupled with some pretty cheap sentimentality.
Yes. I don't like the arrogance of it. Because there is an implied arrogance in that sense of humor. Mm. Yeah. That your view of the world is a widely shared one so that you don't have to work at kind of making any of the jokes actually work, right? Yeah. It's implied as if somehow your own personality carries your jokes through.
Yeah, well, and for some people, he can do no wrong, So, I was trying to imagine, it wasn't a very full cinema, and I was trying to imagine how this would feel in a cinema that was full and really enjoying it. And there were two things, which was, one, I couldn't really imagine that plausibly. No. And two, I kept on thinking about how much I would hate all the people in that audience if that was the case, And it's not that his jokes don't. There were points in the film where I laughed, and there's the business with Thor and Mjolnir. I didn't mind. Thor, Mjolnir, and Stormbreaker have a kind of love triangle thing going on, which is actually kind of fun. And there are moments when those scenes work, but it's very all over the place, and a lot of the humour did fall flat. And some of that is, mood, but some of it. The thing I mentioned to you actually in the cinema, which is when he's saying goodbye to the Guardians of the Galaxy at the start, and Chris Pratt's Star-Lord is, okay, I'm going to go now. Mm. And Thor is going, take the ship. I'll give you the ship as a gift. Mm. And Chris Pratt goes, oh, right, you're giving me my ship as a gift. And it's a scene that you've seen before where the one character is oblivious to the fact that the other character doesn't care. I hated it. I hate that kind. For one thing, it's actually a specific kind of joke that I really hate because it's so nonsensical. It doesn't make sense that Thor is this delusional.
No, I hated that characterization of Thor. Because Thor might not be the most intelligent person in the universe, but he is a god. He is the son of a king. He's had a great education. To make it like some trailer trash surf boy bum is like. It's not keeping character at all, and I don't understand it. And then it makes me, what does Dr. Jane Goodall see in this surfer bum? Like
Dr. Jane Foster.
The whole thing, all of the relationships in the film fall apart when you make Thor so dumb, right? Mm. And the whole humor revolves around him. All of a sudden, have become so stupid, really.
And then the sentimentality relies on him not actually being all that stupid, because ultimately he knows that he's lying to himself about not being in love and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but still, he is meant to be stupid. So he's meant to be good-hearted, right? But stupid, right? And I think you can't have Thor stupid. Yeah, and making jokes about his kind of stupidity, to me, just fall flat. Actually, making jokes about anybody's stupidity would kind of fall flat. I didn't find it endearing.
Which will quickly say kind of what the plot roughly is and who the enemy is this time around, which is Christian Bale playing Gorr the God Butcher, which I presume is a character from the comics, like they all are. It's one that I wasn't aware of. And he's the guy who opens the film, in fact. He's some kind of tribal, he's got like tattoos and that sort of thing, and he's cradling his daughter in his arms, who's like 10 years old, and she dies, and then he goes to see the gods, his gods, which is a god that you haven't seen before, and he kind of cries for help and all that kind of stuff, and is something coming now, that kind of thing, the eternity that my daughter's going to, and it turns out there is no eternity, and the god is dismissive of him, laughs at him, and so I'm thinking, right, is there satire coming, right? Is this going to be about the gods who we put on our pedestals, and the fact that we shouldn't be doing so? Actually, there's nothing that makes them special, and we shouldn't be supporting these people. What Christian Bale's character then does is earn this weapon. Everyone earns weapons in this. Jane earns Mjolnir as well. Everyone's getting chosen by their weapons. He is chosen by this sword that has the power to kill gods, and it corrupts whoever wields it. He then takes it on himself. I'm going to kill all the gods now. So, like I say, I'm thinking, are we getting into kill your masters?
It would have been so much better had it been that way.
Right, like it mildly approaches that when you get to the scene where there's a kind of council of gods. I can't remember what they're called, something city, where all the gods live, basically, and hang out, and Odin is kind of king of the gods, god of the gods.
Zeus.
Sorry, what did I say?
Odin.
Oh, sorry, yes, Zeus, played by Russell Crowe. So Zeus is god of the gods. And they're in this kind of opulent palace, and there's gold and crystal and all that kind of stuff, and it's all about who's going to be at the orgy this year and so on.
It looks awful.
Yeah. And again, I'm kind of thinking, is the film approaching this? This is, the gods don't care about the people. Zeus is saying things along those lines. This is a minor person who's killing us. We don't need to worry about this. He's only killing minor gods. We don't need to worry. But the film never gets as far as repudiate, because ultimately Thor is still going to wind up being a god at the end of this, and a god that we deserve to have, and the right kind of god. It's never a film that's going to say, throw the gods away, we don't need them.
The film is too cute and too smug about itself, really. I mean, what surprises me is that I liked a lot of the performances. I mean, I like Chris Hemsworth doing that stupid surfer dude, comedy against himself. I just don't like him doing that in this role, right?
Right, yeah.
And I thought Christian Bale was fantastic, and I thought, what's his name, who played Zeus, was fantastic.
Oh, Russell Crowe, yeah.
Russell Crowe, yeah, he was funny, and and I loved the cameos with Matt Damon and Luke Hemsworth and so on. They were also, you could see they were having fun and so on. It's just that it barely gets a laugh, and they don't add up, right? So you have all of these wonderful moments that these collaborators bring in, and that must be a result of the direction to a degree, or the director must certainly free them. But, then the scenes are flaccid. The film is very ugly to look at. I thought the aesthetic was terrible. And those scenes that you're talking about, which is like Las Vegas multicolored, kind of, it looks like an Indian wedding on acid, right? It's just extremely ugly. And also kind of purposeless, you don't know what this image is meant to be conveying, really. So I really...
Well, I think that in particular was about opulence and that kind of thing. And,
sure.
About the luxury in which these people live, these gods live. But he doesn't do enough to contrast that with the way that their people live, right? Yes. He just talks about how the gods are certainly... they certainly find those people disposable. So it does have that, but it's not doing enough with it. I also think that the projection in particular didn't help. No. We would normally have seen this on the IMAX screen at Cineworld, but I booked it on a regular screen, and I do wonder whether it would have looked a lot better on the IMAX.
Cheapo moment.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, because I've got no money. You have to pay the surcharge for IMAX, and I do wonder whether it would have looked a lot better on the IMAX.
Maybe, but I think that's no excuse.
But I still take your point. And
I hated even all the gay stuff, which I should welcome. right? So obviously, what is the Asgardian warrior?
Valkyrie is Tessa Thompson's character.
Okay, Valkyrie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like Tessa Thompson, right? And she's so charming and charismatic. But there was actually something about, you know, the way that the lesbianism of the character is depicted that I also thought was smug and, you know, full of itself, really. You know, that thing where she kisses the woman's hand. And I just didn't, I maybe can't articulate why it rubbed me the wrong way, but it did. Yeah, it felt kind of superior somehow, right? And likewise, even, you know, the stuff with the stone face. Korg at the end, which ostensibly has bothered a lot of people. I think if that bothers a lot of people, they really want to be bothered because really it's so ineffectual. But I also thought it was like too cutesy poo, full of itself, really.
And also, his new stone boyfriend has got a big Village People handlebar moustache. So it's like that's how we identify that he's gay.
So I mean, you know, and I like Taika Waititi, but this one just kind of, I don't know if it rubbed me the wrong way or I'm in a bad mood for it. But like I said, I was just veering between trying not to fall asleep and just finding it dull. I mean, it's even hard to be angry at it or anything. You know, it just kind of fell flat all the way through. And it also felt loose and flaccid in a way that might be, you know, entertaining and idiosyncratic and rough around the edges, good in a little independent film, but actually just felt kind of jagged and ineffectual and kind of, yeah, lazy.
I do think Christian Bale was good. You mentioned,
yes, he's good.
I agree with you, and which is surprising for me actually for a character who is really drawn so thinly and not given very much time either. Certainly not when we're building up most of the film. He opens the film and then you don't see him for a very long time, really. We're spending a lot of time just piss-arsing about with Thor, you know, and getting into sort of... He went off with the Guardians of the Galaxy at the end of, I guess it was Endgame. That was going to be his new thing, and I think it was then assumed, at least I assumed, we'd get a film out of that, you know. And actually we get basically an opening scene out of that explains this is the kind of thing they've been up to, and then he leaves them. But I mean, the kind of stuff they've been up to is not funny enough, so I'm sort of glad that we didn't... weren't subject to a whole film of it. And also, I don't really like the Guardians of the Galaxy, but that's more of a personal taste thing.
Yes, I like that very much. The first film I loved.
Yeah. But yeah, Christian Bale, like his character is so thinly drawn. It is just he loses his daughter, is very very angry about it, and goes, "I'm going to kill every god that exists." And he kind of looks kind of a bit Voldemort-y. But then he when he steals the kids from Asgard, I thought actually this is quite creepy. You know, in a really good way. Like, I want him to be threatening, and he is being really quite threatening here.
He is.
So even though it looks... I think if you saw him on paper, you'd go, this is quite unimaginative, the way he looks and the way he sounds and the way he feels. But
no, I actually liked all of that.
I think he plays against the kind of lightness of the rest of it very well.
Yes. He's got a certain kind of weight and authority that the rest of the film lacks.
Yeah.
You know, I also hated what they did with the Natalie Portman character. You know, to just kind of turn her into Thor, right? I thought that was kind of lazy as well, as if you can't make that character interesting, you know, and appealing and arresting within its own terms. Yeah, you've got to kind of, you know, turn her into like a female Thor to make her interesting. I
assume that comes from the comics as well. You know, well, I don't think these films. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but I don't think these films ever have an original thing like that going on. It's always something that's been drawn from a storyline from the comic.
Well, if it's drawn from a storyline, it's, you know, it doesn't make any difference. I still thought it was kind of, you know, a lazy way of making her more interesting.
Well, I think the thing that is interesting about that is the thing about her covering up her cancer and finding that Mjolnir, who she has now earned, as I said, has chosen her. Is giving her kind of life, until it turns out that actually the great power of Mjolnir is draining her life. But you know, it doesn't look like when she puts down Mjolnir, she turns into this desiccated, cancer-ridden thing. And when she's holding Mjolnir, she's, you know, fucking Lady Thor or whatever. What do they call her? The Great Thor or something. She gives herself a special.
The Mighty Thor.
Mighty Thor. That's it. So that's kind of, you know, that is where that could be interesting. And it's not made interesting enough. And that's ultimately where you're supposed to find the kind of relationship with Thor interesting, that they're both lying to themselves and have been lying to themselves, and ultimately they love each other. But it's never made enough of. It's not... it's not interesting enough, it's not moving enough. In fact, it occurred to me that one of the reasons that I was glad that we didn't get a Thor plus Guardians of the Galaxy film in its own right is because there was no chemistry between them at all.
Well, I think what I really hated was Thor, and actually I think that comes out of the arrogance of Chris Hemsworth, who's really game. Yeah, he's the kind of actor I love because he just goes for it, right? But there's also all these attempts to make him look cute. So, oh look, here's Chris Hemsworth fat, as if that in itself is meant to be like the great joke. Ha 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 ha, he's fat. Right, and then here he is. He's naked. Ha ha ha. Doesn't he look gorgeous? Right, and then here he is. He's stupid. Right, I mean, of all the things that you pick to laugh about, they're all kind of patronizing and unappealing, right? And kind of a real disservice to the audience, I think. And collectively, they're like, ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, actually, he is kind of the least appealing thing about the film, in a way. Which is an issue. I don't think he carries off. He is a funny actor, he has been a funny actor.
Yeah, he's funny.
Not in this, he's not.
Yeah, I think the humour just doesn't work.
But it's not entirely his fault. I think all the comic setups really are very lame.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's at all his fault. I think, is somebody probably suggested, isn't it a good idea to make Chris Hemsworth fat, and try to make 10 jokes out of that? And they should have said no. Well, the
fatness did. I mean, they play on it here, but the fatness did start in Endgame because the thing in Endgame was after was it a few years after the snap?
Yes.
Then he's decided I'm no god anymore, and he's become fat and he's playing video games. That's where that came from initially.
Yeah, and it didn't bother me there actually, but I think it was here it did bother me, because it went on, and then also because of what it was paired with, the stupidity. And the nakedness is that you're all meant to go and, faint in an orgasm at seeing, a 45-year-old man naked. I mean, please, from the backside.
I thought it was gorgeous.
Well, good for you. I mean, I didn't particularly, and I'm certainly not going to faint about it, right?
Yeah. I didn't mind the faint. I thought that was not... I didn't laugh, but I didn't mind the fainting joke. I thought,
well,
it was all right by me.
So, and then the sentimentality on top of it, the inarticulate sentimentality. He can't express himself to Jane. He's too, uneducated or stupid to be able to say what he thinks. I mean, I just really despise the whole characterization of Thor.
Yeah. What did you think about the kids becoming warriors, being given weapons, being given... for a temporary period, Thor's power.
That would have been cute in another movie.
See, I think the thing is that... someone said on Facebook, in fact, I can't remember who it was, that either they'd seen it or their kid had seen it and said it was just for kids. It was boring and it was for kids. And I think the thing about it being for kids is actually important. It is for kids. And the thing is, if I were a kid of that age, those kids are all sort of 10, 11 years old... If I were a kid of that age watching this film, I think I'd be very excited by that. It's the kind of thing that I would like.
But then you would need to give more attention to the children.
Yeah.
And you would need to make the children central rather than sidelines. Because the girl is brought in at the beginning and at the end. Right. And the children are brought in in a gang.
Yeah.
In an almost undifferentiated gang up towards the end. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it does work for kids better than it does for adults. But even if it does work for kids better than for adults... it's still not much.
Yeah, and the thing is, I want to think about the film. I would like the film. I think the film thinks of itself as being more for kids than most Marvel films are. And actually, Marvel films are for kids, really, in some sense or other. And this one, I think, is playing up on it. And not just with those child characters, but I think with the general tone of a lot of it. But then it's also full of swearing. And I kind of wonder, I don't mean to sound prudish about it, because I don't think I am. But I don't think it's something that you would whack into a film that is full of... that you're aiming at children of that kind of age.
I mean, if it's aimed for young children, you're making all these orgy jokes.
Yeah. Because there are lots of... there are definitely jokes in films that you miss as a kid, and then you watch it 20 years later, and you go, I can't believe I didn't see that very obvious sex joke. Or so. In the first Toy Story, when they meet Buzz for the first time, and Woody's very jealous of him, and he's got his laser, and Mr. Potato Head says he's got laser envy.
Mm-hmm.
That's great, and I didn't get that for 15 years.
Yes.
So there are there, but it's not. That's not what's happening here.
I think the kids are addressed.
Yeah.
You know, thus the reason why there are so many of them in the film. So I think the film is trying to have it both ways. So it's not making a film for children, but it's adding elements that would appeal to children as part of a larger audience. But I also didn't like it because I thought, for example, all the battle sequences were terrible. There were just things exploding around. It was very difficult to get a sense of what was happening. It was very difficult to get a sense of who was doing what and what child was what. Or even what each adult was doing in relation to the other. So I'm afraid I just can't find a good thing to say about it.
No, the action had some decent ideas, I thought. I liked that Mjolnir, because Mjolnir was destroyed and has now reassembled itself, it can now explode into shards.
Well, the idea of the hammer, exploding into shards and so on, I like the idea. I actually didn't like the execution.
I didn't think the execution was too bad. I also had to go and Google because I was like, Mjolnir... When did Mjolnir get destroyed? Because wasn't Mjolnir... Mjolnir got destroyed by Thor's sister. But that was before Endgame, when Mjolnir decides that Steve Rogers is worthy. Which was a great moment. Actually, it made me reflect on that because, like, that in the cinema, that was a great moment, and people cheered when Mjolnir flew off to Captain America. And now that weapons are being earned by people left, right, and centre, it's like it's not interesting that now it's decided that Jane is good. But I had to look it up because I was like, wait, Mjolnir wasn't broken then, and then thankfully the Marvel fucking Wikipedia thing is like, no, that was alternate universe.
Yes.
Oh, Jesus, I've got to keep track of all these fucking universes these days.
But actually, I'm glad you mentioned, Infinity War, because it makes you realize how poor this film is. It doesn't have any of the emotional moments or any of the whooping audience response that, like, Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man film did, or the latest Avengers film did, or actually, like, even, the Black Widow film, which I thought was pretty bad. Some of the action there was, like, incomparably superior to anything that you see in this film. I mean, I think this is really, like, scraping the barrel.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, hard to recommend. Actually, was it worse for you than Doctor Strange that we saw recently?
Yes.
I agree with that.
Yeah, because I love the glossy production value of that Doctor Strange. And actually, the move into the alternate universe, there were some shots that were pretty dazzling there.
Yeah.
Visually, and there's nothing like that in this film.
No, not really.
All right.
It's too self-satisfied.
Yes. So, fuck you, Taika Waititi.
Well, steady.
Well, no, it's like, because he did seem like such an original voice with so much potential. And this is really taking that original voice for granted, as if it's in itself appealing, as if you don't need to do anything with it.
It does kind of feel like that thing of when someone has been told uncritically that they are great for 10 years.
Exactly.
And they're starting to believe their own bullshit a bit. Yeah.
So get on the job. All right, thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are wrong.
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.